Good morning to you, and thank you so much for being with us today. The show is Unfiltered, where we get to look at the news-making headlines from across the continent of Africa and those which have trended over this week, and we do have so much in store for you as far as that is concerned. But before we get into that, let me bring us up to date with the headlines this morning and see what are the papers saying across the continent. We start with those papers from Kenya. The Star newspaper, Kindiki to Raila, you will be met with full force as the Azimio strategy consists of defiance, protest, boycotts and peaceful sit-ins. That story is on page 6 on the Star newspaper. Exclusive, we shall crush the bandits, says Interior CS. Praying partner murder suspect post as a priest, and then MPs to question CSS in Parliament every Wednesday. That is what we have there on the Star newspaper. The Standard newspaper. Raila set for protest, but Kindiki says try. Azimio leader says the grand demos have started with March 20th climax in Nairobi, but Interior CS says he will have none of the daring Raila to disrupt government services and face full force of the law. Maize millers shut down after subsidy delay. Small, medium-sized millers have closed down after government delayed refunding money spent under maize subsidy program. That story is on page 8. New school uniform rules to rattle sector. MPs want counties to have distinct colors for uniforms and to standardize the price, where to buy them, and quality to ease parents' burden. Grace Onyango, pioneer woman, takes a final bow. She was the first member of parliament as a woman in Kenya. I think she served as a first woman member of parliament in Kisumu many years ago. So she died on the International Women's Day. The Daily Nation, the main headline, campaign of defiance, shifting gears on the 5th anniversary of his truce with former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Azimio leader Raila Odinga yesterday upped the pressure on President William Ruto, announcing the start of nationwide mass action and launching a political green revolution against the president. The story you'll find on page 4 and 5. Graft, donor demands refund of stolen 40 million Kenya shillings. The National AIDS and STI Control Program engaged in fraudulent and collusive practices during the selection of hotels for program activities funded by the Global Fund. The story is on the back page, and then CSS to appear before House in new changes. I think that will be in order so that they are able to respond to some of the questions in Parliament that, and maybe give a detailed report on perhaps how the government is, what the government is doing and how it is responding to the issues of the day in the country. So I guess that is in order. The New Times, that is from Rwanda. Meteor, Rwanda explains rare heat wave in Kigali. Rains are expected from March the 9th onwards. And then Rwanda give directly to strengthen partnership in poverty reduction. The Citizen from Tanzania, new agreement set to give local startups a big boost. The French-Tanzania Chamber of Commerce and Sahara Accelerator, an impact accelerator supporting early-stage businesses, yesterday signed an MOU to support Tanzanian startups. And then Tanzania appointed to Global Auditors Board. Samia's influence in tourism rebound, and why NMB Bank opted to list Jasiri bond on Luxembourg bourse. That you have on the front page of the Citizen newspaper. The Daily News from Zimbabwe, make ready for a woman president, leading rights campaigner tells patriarchal Zimbabwe. Okay, Newsday, also from Zimbabwe, I've reached out to Idi. That is what Chamisa is quoted to have said. Daily Monitor from Uganda, court orders URA, that is the Ugandan Revenue Authority, off bank client's account, and government plans 70 billion Uganda shillings payout for ESCOM. An anti-homosexuality bill tabled in the House, and we did everything to save Kakuru. That is according to the Chief Justice. And Health Ministry seeks 2.7 billion Uganda shillings for Lubowa Hospital. The Nation from Nigeria, survivors recount moment train slammed into the bus. A very horrible accident happened yesterday in Nigeria. 6 have died, 29 critically injured, and 50 have suffered injuries. Buhari Tinubu sympathize with the victims of that crash. The Guardian also, still from Nigeria, pole shift may cost Nigeria more than 2.3 billion US dollars suffered in 2019. Despite reported positive trend, palm oil industry is still struggling, and 1 week after Supreme Court ruling, Central Bank of Nigeria silence stocks confusion. That's what we have on the front page of the Guardian. The Punch. NRC Lasema blame driver as federal government orders probe. Still from Nigeria, and INEC faults judgment permitting temporary voter card for polls. What's really happening in Nigeria now? The court has allowed temporary voters card. What does that look like? Is it the same as the normal voters card, or this has a different status? Because INEC is faulting that ruling by the court there. And then I think that's what we have on some of the newspapers from across the continent this morning. I do not have those from outside, from the UK, so I guess I'll just leave that there. And you are now up to date with the latest news from across the continent. So let's just get into a detailed a bulletin before we get into our conversation. And we start from Tunisia. And President Kais Saied has announced the municipal councils elected in 2018 are to be dissolved and replaced by what he called special delegations. The councils were seen as one of the democratic gains achieved in Tunisia after the uprising in 2011 that overthrew the autocratic regime of Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali. The councils are dominated by what are now the main opposition parties to Mr. Said, who is increasingly imposing what his critics say is a one-man rule in Tunisia. He said the new council also will be elected, but under new rules that he will write. That is what we get from there in Tunisia. And then we head over to Ethiopia, and Amnesty International on Thursday called on the Ethiopian authorities to lift the blocking of access to several social networks, including Facebook, Telegram, TikTok, and YouTube, which have been inaccessible since February the 9th in Ethiopia. The web pages of Facebook, Telegram, TikTok, and YouTube, or their mobile applications, were still unavailable on Thursday in Ethiopia. AFP journalists have reported the Open Observatory of Network Interference, OONI, a censorship detection association, has noted the blocking of these social networks since February the 9th. According to Amnesty, these blockages follow calls for demonstrations by leaders of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in the country to protest against the recent establishment of a dissident synod. Apune Matthias, the matriarch of the Tewadeho Church, which represents about 40% of the country's 120 million inhabitants, has criticized Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for offering a form of recognition to the excommunicated illegitimate group and accused him of interfering in religious affairs. The demonstrations were eventually cancelled after a meeting between church leaders and Mr. Abiy. When contacted by the AFP, neither the Prime Minister's office nor the Ethio Telecommunications, which is a 100% public operator, replied immediately. The Ethiopian authorities have cut or restricted access to the internet or to certain platforms several times in recent years. The previous government did so several times before 2015 and 2017 when it was facing protest movement not seen in 25 years. We head back to Tunisia, and the Tunisian Coast Guard announced on Thursday that 14 migrants from sub-Saharan African countries had drowned and 54 others had been rescued after the boat carrying them sank off the coast of Tunisia. The boat carrying the migrants sank off the coast of Sfax on Wednesday, which is in central eastern Tunisia, on Wednesday night, and the Coast Guard recovered 14 bodies of migrants and rescued 54 others, said the spokesperson for the Tunisian Coast Guard on Facebook page. The shipwreck comes at a time when many migrants from sub-Saharan African countries are seeking to leave Tunisia after Tunisian President Kais Saied made remarks against illegal immigration. On February the 21st, Saied said the presence in Tunisia of hordes of illegal immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa was a source of violence and crime and a criminal enterprise aimed at changing the demographic composition of the country. After his speech, condemned by the NGOs as racist and hateful, nationals of sub-Saharan African countries reported an upsurge in attacks against them and rushed by the dozen to their embassies to be repatriated. According to official figures, Tunisia has more than 21,000 nationals from sub-Saharan African countries, the majority of whom are in irregular situation, which is less than 0.2% of a total population of about 12 million. Tunisia, a North African country whose coastline is less than 150 kilometers from the Italian island of Lampedusa, regularly records attempts by migrants to leave for Italy. According to official Italian figures, more than 32,000 migrants, including 18,000 Tunisians, arrived illegally in Italy from Tunisia in 2022. In an apparent attempt to appease after the outcry over his remarks, Mr. Said, during a meeting on Wednesday with President of Guinea-Bissau, Umaru Sissoko Embalo, who was stopping in Tunis, that Africans in Tunisia were brothers, according to a video released by the Tunisian presidency, affirming that the objective of his speech was to enforce the Tunisian legality concerning foreigners and prevent any parallel jurisdiction to the state's jurisdictions. He rejected the malicious comments of those who wanted to interpret the speech to their liking to harm Tunisia. This situation concerning Africans, he said, cannot be interpreted by malicious tongues as they have done in the recent days as racism. And so he asked, what are these people really talking about? Really? President Said? Very well. At least 36 people were killed by extremists in conflict-ridden Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the military said on Thursday. The Allied Democratic Forces, a rebel militia with links to the Islamic State group, killed civilians in Mukondi village in North Kivu province, said Congo Army spokesperson in Beni, Captain Anthony Mwalushayi. Conflict has been simmering in eastern DRC for decades, and there are more than 120 armed groups which are fighting for power, influence and resources, and some to protect their communities. The ADF has been largely active in North Kivu province, but has recently extended its operations into neighboring Ituri province and to areas near the regional capital. In Goma, the ADF rebels are accused by the United Nations and rights groups of targeting, maiming, raping and abducting civilians, including children. Earlier this month, the United States offered a reward of up to $5 million for information that could lead to the capture of the group's leader, Seka Musa Baluku. The attack began around 7 p.m. on Wednesday local time when men with guns and machetes stormed the villages and started indiscriminately killing people, witnesses told the AFP News. And some people are blaming the incident on the Congo's army's lack of presence in the area. The ADF persistence and evolution in eastern DRC for nearly 3 decades exposes the extent of the challenge facing the government. Analysts would say that. And a French court that dismissed a landmark case against Total Energies for a massive oil project in Uganda and Tanzania after several NGOs filed a suit to suspend the controversial project. It was the first case of its kind in France, and activists had hoped it would set a legal precedent to halt projects deemed harmful to the environment and human rights. 6 NGOs that filed the suit argued the development of the East African crude oil pipeline failed to adhere to a duty of vigilance, a 2017 law that compels companies to avoid grave harm to human rights, health, safety, and nation and the environment. The court in February ruled the case was inadmissible, saying the plaintiffs did not correctly follow court procedures against the energy giant. It said the plaintiffs submitted accounts to the court in December that were substantially different from those that were presented to Total Energies in a formal notice in 2019 when the case was initiated. The suit was brought by two French and four Ugandan NGOs, which accused Total Energies of taking land for more than 100,000 people without adequate compensation. They also said the company drilled wells in the biodiversity-rich Murchison Falls National Park on the shores of Lake Albert. Friends of the Earth and Survival, the two French NGOs, and the Ugandan groups denied having substantially modified their submissions to the court. And then we go to Mali. The military rulers say they did not force France to remove its soldiers from the West African nation. France withdrew its troops last year, ending a 9-year military operation in the country to fight armed groups. In the absence of the French forces, Mali's military rulers brought in Russia's Wagner group to boost government soldiers. Last month, the European Union slapped sanctions to the head of the Wagner forces in Mali, saying the mercenaries have been involved in acts of violence and multiple human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings. Mali's Prime Minister Chegel Kokala Maiga spoke to Al Jazeera about the ongoing fight against the rebels in Mali, as well as Bamako's relations with France, Russia, and the African Union. And he had so much to say about that, because I watched that interview. Now we go to Senegal, and the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hadjibou Soumaré was on Thursday taken into police custody after questioning President Macky Sall if he had financed a French politician. His lawyer told the media that Mr. Soumaré was summoned by police on Thursday over his letter to the president about the alleged donation. In the letter, Mr. Soumaré had asked the president whether he had donated 12 million euros, that is equivalent to $12.7 million to a French political figure whose party is distinguished by hatred and rejection of others. The Senegalese government on Tuesday denied making any financial donation to the leader of France's national rally, Marine Le Pen, who visited Mr. Sall on the 18th of January. It rejected and condemned the insinuations and described them as cowardly and unfounded, according to a statement. And the latest from Nigeria. Police in Nigeria said at least 25 people have been killed in an attack by Islamist militants in northeastern Borno State. The attack took place in the fishing town of Dikwa, which is near a stronghold of Boko Haram insurgents. The UN says extremist violence since 2009 has left more than 350,000 people dead and displaced millions of others. And we head over to Uganda. Uganda said on Thursday it expects to start generating at least 1,000 megawatts from nuclear power by 2031 as it moves to diversify its sources of electricity and accelerate its energy transition, a key part of its climate change response. Uganda has uranium deposits, and President Yoweri Museveni has said his government is keen to exploit them for its potential nuclear energy development. Now, the East African country has signed a deal with China, which the China National Nuclear Corporation would help Uganda build capacity in the use of atomic energy for peaceful purposes. The first nuclear project, Buyende Nuclear Power Plant, would be located at Buyende, about 150 kilometers north of the capital in Kampala. Energy Minerals Minister Ruth Nakabirwa Sentamu said in a statement in Africa, only South Africa at present has an operational nuclear plant, while Russia's state-owned energy corporation Rosatom last year started construction of Egypt's first nuclear plant. Uganda has an installed generating capacity of about 1,500 megawatts, but officials say they expect the country's energy needs to jump in coming year as earnings from oil exports fuel an economic boom. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Well, there's a body that has been set to regulate nuclear by the United Nations, but you can use nuclear for peaceful purposes. I think you're allowed to do that, and that is what Uganda is trying to explore there by the help of China, to see if it can use nuclear to generate more power to fill in the deficit in the country. And in the continent, presently, it's only South Africa that has operational nuclear power. And you wonder, why can't they explore that as well for a peaceful purpose, to work on finding alternative sources of energy to power the country? Because South Africa has been going through some really tough time as far as its power outages is concerned. Like, South Africans are now used to just going for hours without power, the rationing and all that. South Africa, Nigeria, these countries. And so one of the developed countries in Africa. And you wonder, with all this advancement in technology, why are people still suffering? Why are people still suffering from lack of power? That if they had a proper leadership that was really set to address some of these things, it would address. The other day, on Monday actually, President Cyril Ramaphosa reshuffled his cabinet and put a different minister in the docket and see if they can find a solution. They can't. If the resources that are there are still the resources that are there, and the kind of mindset is still the same. However many people you fire and bring and replace and all that in the same docket to try and find a solution for the power problems, the problems will still exist until really the leadership in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and your advisors, and who perhaps should see how you can engage with experts to try and help you solve this problem of power outages and lack of enough power supply to South Africans. There are ways that you can explore, including this nuclear power, which you happen to be the only country in Africa that possesses this, and yet, you have all these problems with powers. I just don't get it. So they keep changing ministers of this portfolio, especially there in South Africa, but none of it has really brought any changes until certain things are changed and we have a proper leadership. Or maybe you bring in advisors that can really help in solving this matter. Then, however, whichever person that holds that docket, it's really not going to change anything. Change the policies, bring in experts, see what other methods you could explore, like what Uganda now is doing. And I haven't heard Uganda suffering from power outages. I think Uganda, the same as Kenya. Of course, Kenya is a bit farther as far as the electrification is concerned of the country. President Uhuru Kenyatta's administration had the last mile project, and this was meant to provide power to all majority of the rural areas in Kenya. So even in the hinterlands, places where they could have never expected or never imagined power being there. I think that is one of the key things that former President Uhuru Kenyatta will be remembered with. Of course, there were other developmental partners that partnered with his administration to do this, and you can see the result of this. We've seen more schools come up in these rural areas. We've seen a bit more of small economic, towns and wake up, and some local economy being vibrant because of availability of power. So power is very important to a country that wants to move forward, and to a country that wants to truly address the issue of its GDP and economic empowerment to its people. Power is a key component as it runs a lot of these things, and it is a requirement. So President Uhuru Kenyatta recognized this, and so he was intentional in making sure that most or majority of the villages, there's still a few who are still yet to have it, but majority of the villages in Kenya have power, because initially we could have the major towns and cities, and then perhaps the villages adjacent to that. Then after that, power was not distributed as it is right now. But right now, it's all over the place, and they made sure that the payment was so minimal. You don't pay an arm and a leg for you to have power connection to your home. So that has really transformed the rural life, our lives as we used to know it, to something that now you don't have to travel for kilometers to go charge your phone if you're in the village, or to have anything done. So that has really transformed especially the local economies. This has meant so much even to the schools. Children are able to stay up to the school up to late doing their homeworks, come into the school very early to learn, the morning hours, because there's power available in our villages. So I think that is very important. So a giant country like South Africa, I think it is a shame that you really can't figure out how to address this matter of power. President Cyril Ramaphosa, just a few weeks ago, you were saying now you're going to declare the power outages as a national disaster. What a shame. What a shame. Knowing what we know and other other options that are available that the country can explore to actually address this matter effectively. These knee-jerk solutions that some of our leaders come with, you go praying for things that God has given you brain to do and the capacity to do. You declare a national disaster over something that if you had professionals, if you visited a country like Israel that you keep fighting, you would learn something. Even the Gulf countries that you go to the deserts and they have all these solar panels. And in Africa, we do enjoy a favorable weather, that even the solar panel energy, it is something that we can really, really explore, because majority of our countries enjoy sunshine almost all year round. So we're able to harness this, but it's just it's the level of incompetence, and then you add it to the politicization of everything that we do, that has nothing to do with finding solutions and addressing the pressing issues in our country. So you realize even things that leaders can do, politics is just takes center stage, and they don't get to do what it is they're supposed to do. People are elected, instead of settling down and delivering to the people, they start engaging in politics again in readiness for the next election. So the people lose out so much. So we have to look at even the kind of people we elect, because I believe if South Africa was serious, like now what you're seeing Uganda do, then it can really find a solution to this problem. So I think this is kudos to Ugandan government. Of course, this is going to be by the help of China, under the China National Nuclear Corporation. I don't know if I need to raise an alarm on that, but hey, if this deal is going to benefit the people of Uganda, then why not? So it is a good move. So perhaps South Africa should borrow some of these examples and travel around and see what else, what is the rest of the people doing, and how are the people out there addressing the issue of power, of energy, and how can we adopt this? Because Africa, we love crying wolf and we love playing victim. It is because of these people that now we are suffering from this and that. It is because of climate change. It is true that these developed countries, the leaders in emitting these dangerous fuels and emissions, and now we have to suffer. But at the end of the day, we also have a part to play, and we do have other things that we can do in our countries to better our lives and to address some of these problems. We can't keep playing victim forever. We can't. We have to find ways to find solutions to some of these things. So that's all I'm saying. It's true. some wrongs have been done, and Africa is suffering from certain factors that perhaps we can't really overrule, from colonialism and external interference. But a lot of these things we have allowed to happen, and a lot of these things, it's just us to blame. So let's just learn to do things right and find solutions to our own issues, and let's make sure that we have powered countries with enough fuel, alternative fuels. We can have solutions for things like this. South Africa and Nigeria and other countries that are struggling to power their countries. Surely, let's explore alternative ways and means of addressing this. So now, the Mali's military rulers say they did not force France to remove its soldiers from West African nation. Mali. What is it that now is going on with their newfound friend, the Russian mercenaries, that now they have to come out and make such statements? Because we saw how that played out. You became very uncomfortable with France. You closed down France's radio station. You expelled France's, did you? I think you did. Ambassador to Mali. I don't know if France has sent a new one, and you made sure that your relationship with France was strained. And some of the issues you're raising with France, I can understand where that might be coming from, but I know what made you uncomfortable is the push by France for you to allow for an election that will allow a civilian rule. And I think that was your point of departure with France, because you felt you did not want to get pushed, and because you're working on your constitution, I guess, and this constitution is meant to be coming out soon, and you're saying you're organizing for an election that is meant to be taking place in a few years' time, I guess next year. And this was the falling out with you and France. Of course, Mali has not had a very rosy relationship with France, even before Mali, the removal of Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. That was the president that was removed, but he died. He died last year in January, after I think he was removed in 2021, thereabout. And so that was the departure and the coming in of the Wagner military mercenaries from Russia into Mali. So for you now to come and say, you do not force France to remove its soldiers from your country. How are you expecting that France will still have its soldiers in your country to help you fight the extremist groups, while you have invited another army that might not be in good working relationship with France? I don't think that was going to be something you expected France to do. And so sometimes there's what we call in diplomacy, it's a non-signal or signaling. It's called signaling. You don't have to tell me to leave for me to know you're telling me to leave. You don't have to make a statement and say I'm going to exhibit certain levels of aggression toward country A or country B, but your actions and some of on issues and how you approach on issues and the things that you do without even you saying what you mean, one can easily interpret that to really know, to read the mood and to know what it is exactly you feel about their country or about a certain issue. So it's called signaling in the diplomatic world. And by you bringing in the Wagner group, the Russian mercenary, you signaled to France that maybe it's about time your troops left Mali, because maybe you felt the France's troops are not doing enough there to help in fighting these jihadist activities. But since this group has been in your country, Mali, what have you been able to achieve so far? I see the attacks have intensified. I see the insecurity has intensified. I've seen a few other what do you call it, a protest in the streets, and because some section of the population are realizing that maybe France was, as much as it might not have been doing a good job 100%, but perhaps they were better off. And of course, there's a section of the country that feels, Russia's mercenaries are probably doing a better job. So you have you have compounded the trouble for Mali. We should have severed ties with Russia, with France, and then just find means and ways of working within yourselves or working with other blocks within the West African countries or something like that, instead of bringing another player, which also is coming in with their own ulterior motives, and they're coming in just to advance their own agenda, and Mali, before you know it, will be a field of the proxy wars. And maybe that's what France realized and had its soldiers removed from Mali. But you can't say that you did not force France to remove its soldiers from your country. You did force Mali to remove its soldiers from your country by your actions, and I think you became very aggressive in having them there, and the protests that were being organized, I don't know by who, against the France's troops there. So I think them being there was no longer attainable. So they had to leave for their own interest, because at the end of the day, when France or anybody else is sending their troops or is engaging in a certain way with a certain country, as much as they're there, and in this case, France wanted us to believe that they were helping Mali to fight the insurgents. And to some extent, we can't downplay the role that France has had. Previously, it really did help. Before the coming of Boubacar Keïta, there was another president that, in fact, invited France there to help in handling this matter. And France did do a good job. But after France did that job, France decided, we might as well just stay longer and observe and see how things are. So instead of removing the troops, it increased its troops. And before you know it, the people are becoming very uncomfortable with having all this French presence in their streets. And so France overstayed its visit in terms of having the presence of its troops there in Mali. You have to know when to leave. The rules of engagement. I'm not a security expert, but if you have to have an intention, have a strategy, and be very clear about the goal, and once you achieve that goal, then you must know when to leave. And should there be another problem that comes up after the fact, then maybe you can work on another agreement and, get another strategy, execute it, and get going. But in what we see in the conflicts and how these powers come and the interventions that we see, a lot of these forces sometimes overstay. And when they overstay, the locals there begin to feel uncomfortable with these foreign troops in all these countries that we've seen especially across Africa. We've seen it in Somalia, now in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in other areas. And of course, some of these protests, others are usually sponsored by certain interests, but to some extent you would understand, because we tend to overstay. We tend to overstay in countries like, Somalia still needs those troops there. But in certain instances, like this one of Mali, France's forces overstayed their welcome the first time they were invited to help in quelling down the conflict. They ran the Tuaregs out of much parts of the country that they had overtaken all the way from the north. And then after that, they were able to empower and whatever the local forces there, and they took over. And then France did not find a need to just get out. It still continued there. And so that brought it a lot of problems today. But nevertheless, it has to some good extent really helped in quelling. It did years back. But lately, nothing much really. So in the absence of French forces, Mali's military rulers brought in Russia's Wagner group to boost government soldiers. It's not because, France, initially when it said it will remove its forces, I think France was daring Mali. After the coup, and the military junta was not in a hurry to organize for a transition. So France says if things continue being the way they are, so we might consider, taking, removing our troops. And Mali said, you know what, bring it on. And I think at that point, Mali was in talks with Russia. And Russia, being the opportunistic country that it is, well, all of them are, not just Russia. The US is, China is, European Union is, Britain is, all of them are opportunistic, right? So they saw an opportunity to come in and take that, fill that vacuum, and they have been there, So last month, the European Union slapped sanctions to this Wagner group, saying the mercenaries have been involved in acts of violence and multiple human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings. And these are claims that have been coming from Mali. And when some of these killings happen in certain villages there, even the Malian government, the junta, they don't allow access to these areas by the United Nations and by other missions or media. They don't allow. So if you don't allow access for investigation and for further thorough investigation and reporting, then obviously people will assume that there has to be some cover-up of some sorts, and there has to be some things that are being done that are illegal and maybe contrary, and that goes against the human rights. And so Mali has been accused of that, its forces, and working, of course, with this mercenary group from Russia. So it has been covering up from the claims that has been made before over some of the activities that these mercenaries are doing in Mali. But Mali's Prime Minister, Maiga, said that, they're helping. They're helping in fighting these extremist groups. And they're saying that Bamako's relations with France, Russia, and the African Union is something they're working on. And Mali, Burkina Faso, and which other country? And Guinea, and Sudan. They're all being operated. They're all being led by military juntas. They had a press conference just days leading to the African Union summit. And even in African Union, I think they did send their representatives, because the military juntas are not allowed to show up to such a summit, because you can't. They're militaries. They're military. So when you're a military, you can't send a military representative to the African Union. So they did send civilian representatives to the African Union, which they do, who held, a press conference. They're still pushing for them to be accepted back to the African Union and to the ECOWAS. And of course, that came shortly after the visit to Burkina Faso by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, I believe. But I don't think that influence might have been so much so there. So still continues. So this very interesting story from Senegal, that President Macky Sall, who is the current chairperson of African Union, there are some reports Senegal's former Prime Minister Sheikh Hadjibou Soumaré was arrested yesterday, and he was taken to police custody after questioning President Macky Sall. So he was accusing President Macky Sall of financing Marine Le Pen. Now, if you know this far-right politician in France, and her stance on immigration, her stance on, she's like in the far of the far right. We have the far right, and we have others who have gone the farthest of the far in the right wing kind of politics, and she's considered to be that kind of a politician with the rhetoric of, France first and preserving the white race. I think through some good number of spaces, she said it's important. And so even when France was playing in the World Cup, the fact that majority of the players there were just black, all had an African background. She's among the political elites who are not happy about that, and she's saying we need to have a team that really represents France. So because the team had so much, black people, black Frenchmen, her and among other politicians in the far right are not very happy. They're saying that cannot be the representation of France as a country. So to hear that these allegations that the chairman of the African Union put his money to support her campaign, I want to think this is not true. I want to think, Macky Sall, you did not do this. But he's being accused by former Prime Minister that in a letter, Mr. Soumaré, this is the former Prime Minister in Senegal, has asked the president whether he donated 12 million euros, that is equivalent to 12.7 million US dollars, to the French political figure whose party is distinguished by hatred and rejection of others. Like that is the rallying call for Marine Le Pen, and I think we know her. So the Senegalese government on Tuesday denied making any financial donation to the leader of France's national rally, who visited Mr. Sall on the 18th of January. So why would she visit Mr. Sall? But she did, and of course his office, the president's office, rejected and condemned the insinuations and described them as cowardly and unfounded, according to a statement. So we shall just treat this as accusations and allegations, because the president's office has denied these claims. And so the former prime minister who was making these claims was taken into police custody for questioning over these allegations. So maybe if there's some truth to that, then that truth will come out, I think, in due time. And if not, it's not. But I just want to believe that that is not true. That is because that would be ridiculous. Yeah, it will be as ridiculous as what Tunisia's President Kais Saied said a few days ago. When he said that the sub-Saharan black Africans, he has a problem with a good amount of melanin. He says that should not be. That if that is allowed in a huge amount of numbers in Tunisia, then that will change the demographic composition of the country, which is Arab to the core. See, now he said this because of the number of immigrants that pass through Tunisia on their way to Europe. We know that it's just along the route that these migrants pass on their way to Tunisia. And so the African Union chairperson, I think, had a visit on Wednesday. Had a visit on Wednesday, Guinea-Bissau President Umaro Sissoko Embalo, who was stopping in Tunis. The African Union condemned these sentiments, and so they sort of engaged in an exchange. And Mr. Said said he regards Africans in Tunisia as brothers. The fact that he's saying he regards Africans in Tunisia as brothers, is Tunisia not in Africa? Is Tunisia not in Africa? Does it not form part of the beautiful map that is Africa? Because I believe that the African map is just the nicest maps we have in the world. So when he says that he regards Africans in Tunisia as brothers, what are you, President Said? You are in Africa. Matter of fact, Tunisia is a member of African Union. It is African Union. I don't know. Tunisia, Morocco, they have a problem. And they have an identity crisis. And they found themselves in a place where maybe they felt it does not suit them. So they have trouble fitting within the fabric of Africa. So for him even to say that he welcomes all Africans, because after the sentiments that he made, sub-Saharan Africans started being attacked in the streets there in Tunisia, and others who were there legally studying, working, went to their embassies and they were going back to their countries because their lives were now in danger over these racist and hateful comments from President Said. And so there was an outcry. And as I said there, even the African Union condemned his sentiments. So while he was meeting with Guinea-Bissau, that is the chairperson of ECOWAS, he said, his statements were taken out of context, and those people who were trying to do that were being malicious. Your statements are not taken out of context, President Kais Saied. What you said was very clear. And you're saying that it could be a certain people somewhere who have a plan to come and change the demographic composition of your country, which is Arab. So you do not want that purity of Tunisia being an Arabic country to be contaminated with anything from sub-Saharan Africa. That is how I interpreted it, because that is exactly what you said, in your statements that you made on the 21st of February. And you said these illegal immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa were the source of violence and crime that has plagued your country. And so you went ahead, your sentiments went ahead and put a target on the back of these Africans. So that is unfortunate. And I think you should apologize instead of making excuses, and you should try to make sure that you correct that, so that the other sub-Saharan Africans who find themselves in Tunisia legally working or studying, cannot live there in fear and cannot be a target and cannot be sources of cannot be unfairly targeted by Tunisians in that country. Thank you so much. So we are joined right now by Dr. David Matanga. Doctor, very good, still good morning to you.
Good morning, Miriam. Thank you very much. I hope you hear me.
Yes.
Clearly. Thank you very much. I have not been following most of the events. However, I can follow the events right now. If there are any questions that especially on the subject of Central African Republic, I just want to thank you for having raised that issue this week regarding the Central Bozize and his group. One intriguing thing that has made me very concerned the entire week is the way the French have come out after realizing the failing relationship between them and their former colonies. They have actually now started distancing themselves by coming out to be new boys on the block. They said that we shall mend the relationship, we shall make sure. But one thing that touched my eye was the relationship between Kabila, between Tshisekedi and Macron. They had a spat, an open spat, diplomatic spat, of where one person told the other the truth, that you are the one supporting Rwanda, and you should stop supporting Rwanda against Congo, and that you have double standards. I think we need to have that stop, that talk, which is a very, very important medium. That one picked my mind. Bozize's thing picked my mind. The black population being damaged or being killed in Tunisia picked my mind. But we have known that most of those Arab countries in the north, some of them especially, countries like Morocco, they don't believe in us. They believe more that they are on the coasts of, since they are near Europe, they are more Europeans than they are Since for us down here, we are near Indian Ocean. So we are near India than anywhere. That's why you see the Indian communities have tribes in our countries. In Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, the Indians do very well. Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles, South Africa itself is full of the Indian community origin. We have not had any bad relationship with them. But for us to be classified and called that the Africans from the South should go back home, and then xenophobia starts. In the South, South Africa is sending the blacks away, taking them home. In the North, the Tunisians are sending them to go back home. So where is Africa now? That's my question. Another thing that intrigued me this week, because you are discussing almost every topic, is the question of Ukraine and the International Criminal Court, Miriam. The ICC wants to investigate the crimes committed. And the way the ICC has gone in the Ukraine is skewed in the sense that it has gone to Ukraine, but not Russia. You know, why does it emphasize investigating crimes in Ukraine? Now, they went with that notion. It is like the ICC saying, we are going to investigate crimes in Israel. You go with the notion that it is Israel which is actually killing. You won't get it. Like, fortunately or unfortunately for the ICC now, they have found their own medicine, Miriam. The medicine is America. And America says they have their special forces on the ground in Ukraine. And these special forces are killing people. They are maiming people. They are doing operations that must be accountable by international law. So you can see that. Accountable by international law. There's no way you'll have a shortcut. Because international law is clear. If you go in a battle on another ground somewhere, and the people raise a red flag, you are answerable to the international law. And Miriam, this is come back to hit the ICC. It is in catch 22, and the Americans are also in catch 22. If we allow ICC to investigate Ukraine, they will investigate our own soldiers who will be found culpable for crimes. They are also using the latest equipment to send missiles across to Russia. So how will you do the investigations now? Are we not catch 22? That is the point I wanted you to hold. So that another thing that woke up that way. Nigerian elections still are on top of our discussions of how they can go to court and whether the court will rule to nullify. It could take years. Miriam, you saw Atiku's application has not been actually dispensed of. They are still with it. So the Supreme Court takes its time while they are swearing in Mr. Tinubu and which they are going to do. But if you talk about elections, I think there was no election.
And Doc, on top of that, the Nigeria's Electoral Commission has postponed by a week the Saturday's elections to choose new governors, saying it needed more time to reconfigure electronic machines that are at the center of last month's disputed presidential vote. The elections to pick governors in 28 of the country's 36 states will now be held on March the 18th. Governors are among the most influential politicians in Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy and largest oil producer. So INEC has postponed the governor's elections by a week, and they're saying they have to go reconfigure these electronic machines that were used in the presidential election. So if they're going to reconfigure these machines because maybe they have a bit of a problem that might not guarantee a proper election. So how can you convince Nigerians that they're used in the presidential elections is something, the results there is something that they can be trusted?
Originally, Miriam, we are told that these machines take 6 months to reconfigure. You had yourself in your own country, they said 6 months for it to be reconfigured. Some in 2017, was it 2013 or whatever year? So now, if they are going to reconfigure it over a week, where this machine read the real ones? That's one question one would ask. The second question is, what type of information are they reconfiguring? The previous one, so that the other people don't find the servers, find the evidence to table in the Supreme Court. Have you seen that? That is coming under the carpet. Someone is hiding the evidence and they will not appear in the Supreme Court. They will not give it in the Supreme Court because it won't be there. So, what is going on here? I think we have a problem. There is a problem. There is some smoke that will be bad smoke. That is all I can tell you. Elections in Nigeria were not elections. This was a fixed job, done, dusted, and nobody is even condemning the atrocities that were committed.
All right, so the Independent and National Electoral Commission said late on Wednesday it needed more time to reconfigure its bimodal voter accreditation system, BVAS, that uses fingerprints and facial recognition to identify voters and transmit results from polling station. The same BVAS machines were used during last month's presidential and parliamentary vote, and so that's interesting, because observers from the European Union and Commonwealth and other bodies reported a range of problems during last month's election, among them failures in system designed to prevent vote manipulation, and criticized the INEC for poor planning. So if they're responding from this criticism that were pointed out by the European Union and observers, and then they decide to postpone these elections to fix that, they've already shot themselves on the foot. How will they now defend themselves during those petitions that will be presented to the court and say, no, these machines provided full proof of proper elections, and yet, on the other hand, they had a problem, so we had to reconfigure them to ensure we deliver another proper election. I mean, they've already shot themselves in the foot. Will they be able to defend that in court?
Yeah. The whole saga is like the saga of the iron sheets in Uganda. Did that one capture your imagination that all these vulnerable places on earth are misused and the people use them to con people? The minister in charge is a Mugisu, is a tribeswoman like me. But I'm ashamed as a tribe for a person who could steal iron sheets. And now it has emerged out that not only her, but several ministers, several government officials, top on the list, the Prime Minister herself from Uganda was allocating herself iron sheets that are meant for people who are in very distressful positions. Africa, what happened to us? That is another topic that we watched, that we have talked about the whole week. And that is all. You see, what impression does it give to people when they read the things about Africa, surely? Iron sheets stolen for the needy. It is very strange in Britain for iron sheets to be for the needed to be stolen. And such a person will go to jail for life for very many years to teach a lesson.
And another story that made headlines, I don't have it here, but hopefully I can remember the details, is the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi, said that, there could be some challenge in holding the elections in December. So he's giving us a scenario where there are high possibilities that the elections could be postponed. So I don't know if he means the elections for the affected conflict area or the elections for the whole country. And if he happens to postpone these elections, would it not play into what already President Paul Kagame had said a few weeks ago, that President Tshisekedi is not interested in ending this conflict and is looking for an excuse to postpone these elections because he does not want to leave power?
I think all along the signs were there, Miriam. We saw this coming, that Tshisekedi was not very interested in the peace talks. He dragged his feet, he pulled his feet on the peace process, and he could use it as a springboard to say, I cannot hold elections when part of the country is under war. And it is a good reason for everybody internationally to accept that how do you hold an election when some 3/4 of your country will not vote. So it is a done deal. You might not hold elections at all.
Okay. And also this week, South Sudan flexed its muscle a little bit, and they're saying that they will not renew the mandate of the United Nations Human Rights Commission in the country because that human rights is overstepping its mandate over the reports it keeps releasing of the human rights abuses going on in South Sudan. So it's saying South Sudan as a sovereign country it will close down. The same thing Uganda said. But with Uganda, that's a stable country, and there's a possibility there's that institution has 7 years said that will take care of they have strengthened their local capacity to address human rights abuses. So it's a different scenario with South Sudan. So South Sudan also now says we are a sovereign country and we might not renew the mandate of the United Nations Human Rights Commission in the country because of some of these things they keep pointing out that are going on in South Sudan.
Yes. Miriam, you and I, we have tackled South Sudan. It is a very pathetic situation. And I've been very vocal on the issue of how the agreement, reaching the peaceful negotiations, ended up by the agreement not being pro-people, but pro-executive. The executive wanted to silence and control their opponents by extending, giving them more votes, more platforms, more positions. Deputy President 1, Deputy President 2, Deputy President 3, 4, 5. We have 5 vice presidents. That is for what? Yet they cannot bring peace. So for me, Miriam, it is a sad story that this week we saw, and the other week we saw, it has been on the headlines and the lips of every African, where the peace hold in South Sudan. If you want more details, you look for my article, which I have written and published on www Pan-African Forum Ltd.com. You'll find it.
And maybe the reason why this week that has been on the headlines is because President Salva Kiir fired Angelina Teny as the Minister for Defense, the wife of the Vice President Dr. Riek Machar, without giving reasons and without consultation.
Fired, change it. Anything to change an agreement, you go back to the original agreement. So Riek Machar on this one is right. The original agreement was abrogated. On this one, Riek Machar is correct.
So
you got, she is there. It is the agreement. It is the agreement that she will become the Minister of Defense. If you want to remove her, you can call another one from them to become the Minister of Defense.
Yes.
But you can't now switch the ministries.
Unilaterally.
You abrogated agreement. I'm sorry.
So is Kiir intentionally creating more problems, because we know they keep postponing this election, so they're creating an environment where they can't really move forward and they can't really work on the things that they need to act on as as a country. Is he being intentional with these things that he's doing?
You are right. They are creating a suicide situation where you cannot move your jacket. You are wrapped in a jacket. You can't remove it out because the bomb will go off. That's political suicide that has been created in America.
In South Sudan. Anyway, I think we'll end there unless you have anything else.
In South Sudan, created by proxies. Sorry, I am very interested in America most of the time. But Miriam, before you wind up the situation, you haven't congratulated me for the good opinion poll that I gave on Zimbabwe, which I've hit as a pacemaker. Those were pacemaking. And another bishop, a pastor from Zimbabwe referendum, came out from South Africa saying, in fact, they will get 78% landslide. I did not know when I was giving that 75 million, I did not know that themselves in South Sudan, in Zimbabwe, they had already organized and done an internal, opinion, which gives the president 70-80% of the total vote. So I was not very far, I was very near. And I thank everybody who listened to me from London. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was my contribution towards a better Africa. And I think we got it, and it was received by the head of state and other people. They use it as a landmark inquiry, which we have done. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.